Organizations succeed to the extent that all of their members pursue a common goal. Everything in this book goes back to that idea. It goes back to the idea of keeping the main thing, and how this is a very simple and powerful idea that's excessively hard to practice over a long time because it goes against human nature. It's in our nature to drift and complicate things. And the founder of Fastenal, Bob Kierlin, built his entire company building thesis around that idea. Keep everybody in your organization pursuing a common goal. And then Bob uses this book to defend his ideas, but it's laughable that his ideas even need to be defended. His numbers speak for themselves. How the hell does a company selling a commodity product, he says in the book, he had no advantage on products, yet that same company was able to compound all the way to a $38 billion market cap and is one of the best performing stocks over the last quarter century. I'm friends with the co-founder and CEO of Ramp, Eric, and I was texting him about this book and this incredible company while I was reading and researching this episode, because Eric is keeping everyone in his company pursuing a common goal that would make history's greatest founders proud. Ramp is building the world's best tool that gives you everything you need to control your spend, watch your costs, and optimize your financial operations on a single platform. So this is what I texted to Eric. It describes why this obsession with cost control that Fastenal has turned into a massive advantage that fuels other things. So it says, anyone who claims that expense management frugality is not a competitive advantage should pull up a long-term chart of Fastenal's stock price and see how a company that sells nuts and bolts and keeps costs low somehow has been able to eat their competitors' lunch for decades. This is this very virtuous flywheel that begins with keeping operating costs and watching costs very low. By keeping operating costs very low, Fastenal is able to pay their employees incrementally higher wages and thus more effectively develop and retain talented salespeople. The quality of service and depth of knowledge that the employees have eventually brings in more revenue, which grows the business and allows it to further lower operating expenses as a percentage of revenue, thus allowing for more hiring of top quality employees, which brings in more revenue. This creates a virtuous circle of sorts. I can read that paragraph, filter through the 360 biographies of history's greatest entrepreneurs I've read so far for the podcast, and summarize it even better. History's greatest founders knew that watching your costs was the foundation on which other competitive advantages can be built. That is why so many of the great founders made cost control an obsession. Ramp helps you do the same. Ramp gives you everything you need to control your spend, to watch your costs, and to optimize your financial operations on a single platform. Start building your competitive advantage by going to ramp.com and sign up. That is ramp.com. Since its founding in 1967, Fastenal has grown from a small fastener store in Winona, Minnesota, into a multi-billion-dollar global organization. The company is known for its exceptional leadership, innovation, and success. Fastenal was the top-performing stock in America during the quarter century that began with the market crash of 1987. How did a small-town nuts and bolts shop become one of the world's most dynamic growth companies? Whenever asked, company founder Bob Kierlin attributes Fastenal's success to the company's high-quality employees and their commitment to a common goal. This is something he's going to repeat. That is his main idea, the one he repeats most throughout the entire book, that your company should be organized and oriented around a commitment to a common goal. And this is their common goal. Growth through customer service. So whenever asked, company founder Bob Kierlin attributes Fastenal's success to the company's high-quality employees and their commitment to a common goal. Growth through customer service. The company is organized in order to serve those four words, growth through customer service. Underlying that simple answer is an unshakable belief in people, that ordinary individuals can accomplish extraordinary things if given the opportunity. In 1997, Kierlin published this book in an effort to share the unconventional business practices that stem from this philosophy and fuel Fastenal's success. The ideas presented within these pages flew in the face of the prevailing business wisdom at the time, and they remain every bit as relevant and challenging today. The original idea was to provide a teaching tool for future generations of Fastenal leaders. But to anyone with the courage to unleash the vast human potential within your business, organization, team, or group, welcome. That is an excerpt from the back cover of the book that I'm going to talk about today, which is The Power of Fastenal People, and is written by the founder of Fastenal, Robert Kierlin. So the way I would describe this book is it's a cult classic, it's hard to find, and it's about a compounding machine. I'm going to read from the acknowledgments preface and introduction, all of which are very short. What I love about Robert is he gets right to the point. And then I'm going to put the book down briefly and give you an overview of this very unique company. So I want to give you a little background first on Bob Kierlin. He was the founder. He's still alive. He founded Fastenal in 1967 and served as the co-founder and CEO for 35 years. So Fastenal is going to grow from 1,000 square foot location in 1967 to over 3,400 stores by 2023. They are doing like $7.5 billion a year in sales, and their market cap is almost $40 billion. Before founding the company, Bob got a degree in mechanical engineering and then also an MBA. And so in the acknowledgement section, he tells us exactly why he's writing the book and what this is all about. The content of this book derives from what people have taught me, sometimes in classes, but more often through their example. My parents were my first teachers. Those that followed in grade school, high school, and college added to my knowledge. I was privileged to observe good leaders in my early business career. Perhaps I was also privileged to observe some bad ones too. I learned from them all. And the need to write this book derives out of these two sentences. I am aware that Fastenal is a unique organization. Fastenal succeeds because its people succeed. And so it's very obvious as you start to read this book, there's a lot of Buffett and Munger-esque things in it. And that popped out at me from the very first page because he's going through all the people he had to thank to write the book. But then he says something like this: no need to thank any typist, however. Every little character was entered by one of my fingers into a computer at home. One of Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett's favorite founders is this guy, Les Schwab, who I've done 2 episodes on. Les Schwab writes this incredible autobiography, which again is short and to the point. And Les starts that book with this sentence: I did write this 100% with my 40-year-old typewriter. I did not have a ghostwriter. I wanted it in my own words. And so there's going to be a lot of things that Bob believes in and the traits that he has he's going to share in common with a lot of Buffett and Munger's favorite founders. He talks about the fact that, hey, this is the updated version. So he's like, I wrote this book 20 years ago. Since then, our sales have actually grown by a factor of 12. And I think it's even higher now. But he says it all comes from this basic belief that has provided the fuel for this growth. And it's Bob's heartfelt belief in people and their ability to do great things if given the opportunity. Now, think about how crazy this is. So he first wrote this in 1997. This updated version is printed 23 years later. So think about all the technological change that has occurred in that 23-year period. Although the applications of new technology such as the internet, smartphones, barcodes, vending, and automated stocking have changed the how of industrial distribution, which is their business, okay? The technology changed the how. They have not changed the why of a distributor's success. Success still stems from the ingenuity, risk-taking, and hard work of people working together as a team. And he goes back to he has one idea, is the way I would say this. We continue to pursue our common goal, and we continue to find ways to bring out and use the potential of our people. I'm not sure why, but when I got to that sentence, or that paragraph rather, where he's talking about, listen, the technology is going to change. The technology that influences your business may change the how of how you deliver your service, but it will not change the why. Michael Bloomberg, in his autobiography, said something that's very interesting. He says a lot of companies mistake their product for the device that delivers it. Listen to this. This is from Bloomberg's autobiography. The technology that we pioneered in the early 1980s has long since been ancient history, but we never made the error that so many others have, mistaking their product for the device that delivers it. Kodak thought that they were in the camera and film business instead of the photography business. The digital photography revolution passed them by, and after more than a century as one of the most innovative companies in the world, they filed for bankruptcy. At Bloomberg, we got out of the business of building physical computers as soon as PCs began taking off. We knew our core product was data and analytics, not hardware. Do not make the mistake of confusing your product for the device that delivers it. And then he ends the preface with repeating this main idea. The first requirement to have a successful organization, the need to have every member of the organization pursuing a common goal. He already said what his common goal on the very back cover: growth through customer service. And then he continues about the fact that he was a reluctant author, that he had to be pushed to write this book. And the reason he did, I love. He says, I became more aware that the people principles we practice at Fastenal are uncommon and they're in need of defense. This book has only one purpose: to support ideas that don't seem either common or accepted. These ideas come from my experiences in life and are offered to younger people with the hope that by understanding them here, they can avoid needing years to learn from their own experience. These examples come mostly from my 47 years with the Fastenal company. So this is what I love about autobiographies. He has almost half a century of experience. It's almost like having to read this book or to listen to the podcast. It's almost like having a one-sided conversation with somebody who has 50 years of entrepreneurial experience. Fastenal is a people-centered company. Fastenal has no unique product and no unique process, but it has some ideas about people that are at least uncommon, if not unique. So I want to put the book down briefly. Remember, what is the title of the book? The Power of People, the Power of Fastenal People. So I want to give you this company overview and a story about the CEO that succeeded Kierlin and Warren Buffett that I think just knowing all this at the very beginning, I think will make the ideas that he repeats over and over again, that Bob repeats over and over again in the book, very important. What's the most important part of Fastenal's success that outsiders discovering the company for the first time don't understand? The number one thing is the people aspect. The goal is to unleash entrepreneurial passion, a commitment that I will be self-driven to do better than what you can expect. It is a mindset. This is what they're telling their employees. Run your business like you own it. When you trust people to solve problems and make decisions, you let them go. That's where magic happens. That is the story of this company. Fastenal embraces a spirit of radical decentralization and autonomy. Each of its 2,700 stores operates as a standalone business with a clear leader and full P&L responsibility. We grow from the ground up based on the actions and decisions of thousands of people who run their businesses like they own it. I want those people to stay with us forever. They will never have to stop at a certain level. You may have to move, you may have to learn a new market category, but there'll always be opportunities here. We call ourselves a blue-collar sales company. When our folks in the stores are doing it right, customers say, "This guy knows my business better than I do." We don't care where we went to school. We care what they can't teach in school: wisdom, savvy, entrepreneurial spirit. We want to know our customers' businesses so well, what they spend, how they could be more efficient, that they can't imagine doing business with someone else. We are not one giant organization. We are 2,700 small businesses. So keep in mind, what I'm reading from is about 10 years old. So now they have, over 3,400. We are not one giant organization. We are 2,700 small businesses wrapped up into one big company. Society tells us, you're a big company, act like it. We say, no, you don't get to define us. We define ourselves. We go against the grain in almost everything that we do. And so there's just crazy stats about the company that more than 95% of our current batch of general managers have been promoted from within. For nearly all of our senior leaders have worked their way up from entry-level positions. So that leads into the second thing I want to tell you about, which is this interview with the CEO that had succeeded Kierlin, or Bob, we'll call him Bob, when he stepped down. His name is Will Overton. Overton started out at Fastenal as a store clerk. So he went all the way from, they mean business. He went all the way from store clerk to CEO. And so what I'm reading from, I found this out after I finished the book because I'm like, it's just obvious. It's just like, I wonder if Buffett and Munger have ever talked about about this company or the way they are, or about the founder or anything like this. And it turns out when you search, it's like, oh yeah, Buffett would bring up this company in interviews. And so I just want to pull out a couple things from this interview with the CEO. So it talks about what Fastenal is. It's North America's largest wholesale and retail distributor of nuts, bolts, hand tools, and other supplies to the construction and manufacturing markets. It has built a loyal following among customers through quality and service and won countless fans on Wall Street for its thrifty, no-nonsense ways. Warren Buffett is an admirer, having praised Fastenal in an interview. He loved its robust financial performance and its straightforward business plan. This is their business plan: boosting sales by adding customers and increasing its interaction with them. The unexpected shout-out prompted Fastenal CEO Will Overton to trek to Omaha to have lunch with Warren Buffett. The two cost-conscious bosses hit it off. We talked about the importance of sticking to the basics. And one thing they talk about is that the CEO is not afraid to get his hands dirty. In fact, this is something that Bob preaches throughout the book. So, he'll jump in wherever is needed. And the commitment that he has, so let's say they're behind, he'll go help with deliveries. He'll help with sales. He'll help with customer service calls. The CEO actually went through the process of getting a CDL, which is a commercial truck driving license, so he could pitch in when truck drivers are sick. And so there's another description of Fastenal that talks about the fact that what Buffett realized, that it says the two cost-conscious bosses hit it off, and how having a low cost structure is actually a major competitive advantage because all the other things that it fuels. And so it says anybody who claims that expense management and frugality is not a competitive advantage should pull up the long-term chart of Fastenal's stock price and see how a company that sells nuts and bolts and keeps costs low somehow has been able to eat their competitors' lunch for decades. This is the virtuous cycle I think that Buffett realized as well. By keeping operating costs very low, Fastenal is able to pay their employees incrementally higher wages and thus more effectively develop and retain talented salespeople. The quality of service and depth of knowledge that the employees have eventually brings in more revenue, which grows the business and allows it to further lower operating expenses as a percentage of revenue, thus allowing for more hiring of top quality employees, which brings in more revenue. This is an overlooked virtuous circle of sorts. And then one last thing before I pick back up the book, my friend Ray Maddie and I were texting about this. So Raim is the one, he does the Rainmakers podcast. He's a phenomenal researcher. He's also the one, this book is really hard to find. So he's actually sent me this book. And after reading it, he came to the same conclusion that I did. And he says, I realized how much Bob embodied the Mungerisms on incentives and how he only focused on how he can make Fastenal the best company to work for. The results speak for themselves. $38 billion market cap for a company selling commodity products. And then he picks up on something that Bob says himself. It's crazy to me how stuff like this is kind of common knowledge, but people don't really apply it. And so immediately the book begins with an idea that's going to sound a lot like one of Munger's favorite founders, which is Jim Sinegal of Costco. Leadership must constantly be replenished. Every leader knows that a big part of leadership is training other people to be good leaders. So let's pause right there. Every leader knows that a big part of leadership is training other people to lead good leaders. That's the way Bob says it. You know the way that Jim Sinegal says it? He says, as the leader of your company, if you're not spending 90% of your time teaching, you're not doing your job. The business organization achieves long-term success by continuously replenishing leaders inside the organization. The word inside is important. You can bring in a leader from the outside of the organization, but it's much more efficient to develop those you already have. And then immediately Bob pushes back on this idea that the person that starts the company can't be the person that leads the company. The belief that entrepreneurs must eventually be replaced or supplanted by skilled management is false. Entrepreneurs are oftentimes perceived to be eccentric. Yeah, definitely. This can lead to a belief that a more systematic planner is needed to quote unquote manage the organization. Entrepreneurs can learn leadership just as well as anybody else. An entrepreneur's success is as much due to his leadership skills as his work ethic. Walmart's Sam Walton was a leader when the company he started was small, and he remained a leader throughout its remarkable growth. So we're already into, I'm on page 6 of the book, for God's sake. And there's already been at least 3 examples of people that Munger and Buffett admire. Sam Walton, Jim Sinegal, Les Schwab. The commonality between how they all ran their businesses just jumps out at you. In fact, 2 pages later, he's going to come up with an idea, or actually the next page, that sounds a hell of a lot like what Munger would repeat as well. And so he starts out with saying, hey, keeping your organization simple is not simple, but it is very important. And so his idea is like the way to keep your organization simple is orient everything around this commitment to a common goal. Our society places too much importance on organizations. We tend to hold up the structure as important rather than the people who make it up. Our first step is to show organizations for what they really are. Groups of people who come together for a common purpose. The business organization combines the talents of many in the pursuit of a common purpose. All of his ideas, this entire book, all of his ideas serve that idea that you need to commit your entire organization to a common goal, and then you have to look out for things that distract from that common goal. That is why he's saying keeping the organization simple isn't so simple. Human nature goes against it. Successful organizations will achieve their success because they find better ways to involve their members in the purpose of the organization. So that is what I meant about, sounds a hell of a lot like Munger. Well, Munger says that the most elusive of all human goals is keeping things simple and remembering what you set out to do. I really think this book and Bob's main thesis, this which he calls, hey, we need to keep everybody in your organization, concentrated in pursuit of that common purpose, of that common goal, is the way Munger would summarize that for us, is that you have to keep things simple and then remember what you set out to do. And that's very difficult, because especially over a long period of time, because it goes against your human nature. That's why he says it's the most elusive of human goals. And so Bob, like many of the great founders, they do a great job of distilling down to the essence, the principles upon which their business is built into maxims and aphorisms that you can remember, you can repeat, and you can take with you. So he says, hey, keeping the organization simple isn't so simple. What's the next one? The uncommon pursuit of the common goal. I almost feel like when I'm reading this book, he's saying, hey, guys, this isn't rocket science. This is a simple idea that's not easy to do over the long term. And so what is the uncommon pursuit of the common goal? Organizations succeed to the extent that all of their members pursue a common goal. This is one of those simple ideas that are so difficult to practice. The greatest danger to the success of the organization is that it starts developing unnecessary subgroups, and these subgroups start pursuing their own goals rather than the common goal of the organization. That is bureaucracy, is what he's describing. Listen to what Napoleon said. This is a direct quote from Napoleon. Nothing is more important than unity of command. You should have one army acting on one line and led by one commander. Bob says organizations succeed to the extent that all of their members pursue a common goal. And what I love about the simple language and the simple examples he gives in the book, it immediately makes you stop. It made me stop. It's like, okay, what is my common goal that I am pursuing? And then once you identify that, then you start auditing how you're spending your time. And so obviously my common goal is very simple. It's to help you learn from history's greatest entrepreneurs and to do that better than anybody else can in the entire world. And so the second step of that was like, okay, well, let me audit how I'm actually spending my time. Because anything that's not in service of that common goal is a distraction and should be eliminated. And so then Bob says, well, how do you keep everybody focused on a common goal? Remember, he says, we sell commodity products for God's sake. The only competitive advantage we have is our people. So it says, how do you keep everyone focused on a common goal? First, you start treating everybody equally. The organization cannot have some people who are put in a different status than the rest. You don't have executive dining areas and assigned parking spots, or stock options for only the highest paid people, or even dress codes for only some of the people. If the engineers can take off to watch their kids in a softball game, so can the lathe operators and the data entry people. So pause right there. Immediately when it pops to mind when I get to that section, that sounds a hell of a lot like the stuff that Les Schwab and Sam Walton would preach as they built their business. This is from Les Schwab's autobiography. We have had over the years some people in the office that sometimes think that they are more important than the stores. The office serves only one purpose, and that is to serve the stores. Some of our office people sometimes wonder about this, but I've warned them, don't bitch to me because this is the way I want it. If you want to go out and start at the bottom changing tires and work into a manager's job, then hop right to it. If it weren't for those men in the stores working their asses off in all kinds of weather, missing meals, and working god-awful hours, you wouldn't even have a job. So if you're working for Les Schwab, is he not easy to interface with? He's very easy to understand. That's like 5 sentences there. At the end of the 5 sentences, you know exactly what Les believes and how he wants it to run his business. Sam Walton said it very similar. He says, if you're not supporting the customers or supporting the people that support the customers, then we don't have need for you in Walmart. Kept it very, very simple. The reason that's so important because if it's not simple, it won't scale. Bob continues, make sure that everybody can enter your building through the same door. So his whole point is like, listen, these like special stock options, these assigned parking spots, these executive dining areas, these separate entrances, over time, you're telling people with your actions, these are the special people, you guys aren't the special people. So let me go back to Chung Ju Young. Chung Ju Young wrote the most inspiring autobiography I have ever read. I got to do another episode on it because I think it was like episode 117 or something like that. Chung Ju Young, right, is the founder of Hyundai. He starts off so poor as he's a peasant, son of a peasant farmer that he has to eat tree bark in the winter to survive and ends up dying as the richest person in South Korea. This is what he says from his autobiography. He's writing his autobiography when he was like 90. And it's going to sound a hell of a lot like what Les Schwab says, what Sam Walton was saying, and what Bob is saying in this book. Some time ago, someone proposed installing a separate elevator for executives at the company headquarters. I rejected the idea right on the spot. I truly despise the inflated sense of superiority held by executives who expect different treatment from their workers. Why on earth would anyone need a separate elevator? He continues, when I dropped by a construction site one day, the workers were busy laying a new carpet, believing that this was a formality that they should observe for their boss. So literally like a red carpet. So when their boss does a site visit, he can walk on it. This was Chung's response. Such formality is meaningless. With our company motto, their company motto was diligence, frugality, and affection, hanging right there on the wall, Should they have spared a second to think about the workers laying carpet? Is laying this carpet practicing frugality? A carpet was a luxury that I despised. After luxury comes corruption. I have never seen a country prosper with a leader who enjoys luxury. I have never come across a company that thrives under a luxury-loving, wasteful owner. And so we go back to Bob. Why is it so important to have everybody working as a single cohesive team, to have everybody thinking that their role that they're playing is just as important as the person next to them? At Fastenal, we believe that you could be the best salesperson in the world, but if the order picker doesn't pick it right, or the truck driver doesn't get it there on time, or the billing clerk doesn't bill it correctly, you end up with an unhappy customer. Everyone is key. You are better off working to make everyone equal so they stay focused. It goes back. What do you think he's about to say? I bet you can already finish his sentence for him. You are better off working to make everybody equal so they stay focused on the common goal of pleasing the customer. He's going to give us more advice on how to do that. You need to install a reward system that keeps everyone focused on the common goal. He's talking about incentives. If you have Fastenal's common goal of growing our company through customer service, you will avoid any rewards that don't fit that goal. And so when I got to this part of the book, I thought about Charlie Munger's 3 rules for incentives. And so this is what he said. Number 1, everyone underestimates the power of incentives. Number 2, never, ever think about anything else before thinking about the power of incentives. And number 3, which Bob is nailing, the most important rule in management, get the incentives right. And again, you have to be careful of these subgroups that are going to naturally develop in your company, because his whole point is listen, your incentives have to fit your overall common goal, right? The common goal of pleasing the customer. And so he gives an example. If you do these incentives based on separate groups, they can optimize for things that go against your common goal. So he gives an example that this is a really smart idea. We do not reward production people for minimizing scrap if some of that scrap you eliminate comes from the extra parts that guarantee you have a full order quantity ready when the customer wants it. The incentive superpower that Munger talks about, you clearly see by picking up the book. We're like a quarter into the book. That Bob clearly has thought a lot about this. Of course he has. He had 35 years of experience, I think, by the time he wrote the book, and I think 47 years by the time it was published again, or something like that. Just a ton, decades of thinking about this and experience with a single company. Another piece of advice. If you want to use a financial reward to motivate, pay it right away. Do not wait until the end of the year or pay a special bonus to pay a special bonus or profit sharing. Pay it at the end of each month if you can. So right after to reinforce that good behavior that you want, or at least at the very least quarterly. Do not wait to the end of the year. Another main theme of the book is the fact that he's got this radical belief in encouraging and using everybody's creativity throughout your entire organization. And he really goes against, remember, he's got an MBA. And this is what one of the things that also reminded that I think Bob had in common with Munger and Buffett. When you read the shareholder letters, you listen to them, what they said at their AGM. You just repeat over and over again, like business school, they're teaching you the bad things. And so his whole point is this command and control structure was not something that Bob believed in. He thought it was actually would limit the growth of the company. And so he said, and he gives an example of the idea that one person or a group of leaders at the very top should do everything is actually harmful and is eventually going to lead to the decrease of growth in your company. And he learned this. One of the ways he learned this is when he was a Boy Scout, when he was a young boy. One of my first lessons in how not to promote creativity came from the Boy Scouts. The troop that I joined when I was 10 had a leader who did not challenge the kids. He arranged everything for us. So they'd go on camping trips, and instead of teaching them, and they're obviously when you teach somebody, when you let them do something they've never done before, they're going to make mistakes. And so the troop leader's like, I'll set up the tent. I will do all the cooking. I will start the fire. They're essentially just sitting around useless. And he says, we watched other troops cooking stew, making fires, setting up teepees and rope bridges, while we sat around. At the end of a few years, nobody was above the rank of second-class scout in our troop. Today, I probably couldn't survive in the woods for more than a few hours. And he immediately translates that lesson to what he observed in his, multi-decade career. Too many business organizations practice central planning to the extent that the creativity of their people is effectively 95% curtailed. And he rails against this because he was taught that this is better management, and he clearly does not agree with this. Businesses that become large and quote-unquote better managed saw their markets and profits eaten up by nimble startup firms with great ideas and efficient execution. Many large companies resemble small socialist states. Ideas and plans all come from the top. The majority of the workers are treated differently than the top planners, and most of the workers receive little or no self-fulfillment in their jobs. And so this is when he starts repeating another one of his ideas, like you have to learn to delegate. He was afraid to delegate. It's a common, he calls delegate the fear of delegation common, but he thinks it's a terrible, bad habit. Why do companies develop such bad habits? Simply because the people at the top of the organization start focusing on how smart they are rather than focusing on how little they know. If 95% of the people in your company do not participate in the creation of ideas, they will spend their time thinking and talking about cars, sports, and office politics. To add insult to this loss of creativity, most of the people who are ignored are on the front lines. To go back to what Les Schwab said and Sam Walton said, right? You're either serving the customer or serving the people that serve the customer, or we don't need you. The founder of UPS, Jim Casey, same thing. He didn't want to sit and talk to his executives all day, right? I've told the story a million times because it's just very memorable and hilarious. All right, not even hilarious, just like very informative. It's the fact that every time he had a driver, and he instructed his driver every time that we pass a big brown UPS truck, pull over. And Jim would spend all his time, as much time as possible, talking to the people on the front lines, the people actually delivering the service to his customers. So let's go back to this. To add insult to this loss of creativity, most of the people who are ignored are on the front lines, running the machines, are talking to the customers, while the people doing the thinking and the planning are isolated from both. Which group do you think receives the best stimulus to foster creativity? Decentralized decision-making, decentralized decision-making, decentralized decision-making. He wrote that 3 times. I'm not, I'm not repeating that on my own. Say it a few times so it becomes a mantra. He feels this extreme decentralized decision-making is one of the most valuable things that they have in their company culture. With over 2,600 stores around the world, the decisions about which items to stock in each store are left to the people in the store. Computers help to pick a basic starting inventory, but items are added as store personnel gather information about customers in their local market. The people in our stores are able to special order items that their customers request that are usually unavailable within our warehouse system. That idea of allowing them, right? You have a one-off special request from a customer that then you can fill. You have the complete autonomy and trust from your organization to fulfill that request. What's going to happen? And then you obviously inform the customer. It's like, hey, this is special. We have to do this for you. And then you do it to their satisfaction. You have a customer for life. This is something that one of my favorite biographies I've ever read. I think it's episode 316. It's on the founder of Bugatti. And the reason I even found this book is because I became obsessed with Enzo Ferrari, and I did a bunch of episodes on him. And in Ferrari's biographies, it talks about, hey, his blueprint, he was just copying what Bugatti did. And so I find this like crazy biography of Bugatti written by his daughter, I think in like the 1960s. And there's a story in there that I never forgot, that Bugatti receives a letter from one of his customers, okay, about a car that's still operational, a Bugatti car that the guy bought 30 years ago, and something broke on it and he needed it fixed. And Bugatti reads his letter and then writes him back. And the punchline is the incredible level of customer service and just love for the work, his work that Bugatti had, was Bugatti offered to custom make. They didn't stock that part. They didn't even have it anymore. He's like, hey, I'm going to custom make this replacement part for that car that's almost 30 years old, and I'm going to give it to you at cost. That long-term view. Okay, not trying to make a couple dollars on this car. First of all, even doing it's remarkable, right? And then selling it at cost is actually genius, because how many people is that satisfied customer going to tell? A lot more than whatever markup you would make on that one-off part. And so Bob then tells us, why is this so important? Because it's this virtuous cycle it leads to. Consider where your new product ideas come from. We encourage people in each store to come up with products to add to our general lines. If a customer asks for a product that we don't currently sell, we encourage our people to find a possible source to satisfy this customer's request. If successful, the store may then start selling the same product to other customers. Our nearby stores may then also start offering the item. Eventually, it becomes a company-wide product. So a lot of people are like, okay, well, how are you going to manage? You got at the time 2,700 of these little stores. They're all run independently. And he's like, listen, Bob's like, of course, you need some rules, but you don't need these thick manuals that nobody's reading. You need a handful of principles, all oriented around the goal of the organization. This is why it's so genius. This idea of just organizing my entire company on this commitment to a common goal, and then regularly checking, like, is the action, is the way we're spending time, is this idea in service of that common goal? Yes or no? So he says, you need rules, but you can probably put them on 3 sheets of paper and give them to each new employee. These rules will state the common goal for the organization. These rules should instill a good understanding of the common goal of the organization. He's repeating it again. And he says what his common goal is: growing our company through customer service. Eliminate all those 3-ring binders filled with standard management practices. Another suggestion to develop the potential of your people is to emphasize training. Most of the people who join us come out of school with little expertise in our product line. We see their potential and give them an opportunity to achieve. Most of our executive officers started in entry-level positions in Fastenal stores. So he's going to use this importance of constantly training over and over again. I actually think there's a better word for that. Sol Price, who is the most influential retailer to ever live. Sam Walton took more ideas from him. Jim Sinegal of Costco was Sol Price's mentee, and he started working for Sol Price when he was like 19. He gives this interview when he's like 70. He's like, people are like, oh, you must have learned a lot from Sol Price. He's like, no, I didn't learn a lot. I learned everything I know. The amount of successful retailers that built, in some cases, many cases, hundreds of billions of dollars of retail companies, Costco, Home Depot, Walmart, that talked about and learned from Sol Price it's just absolutely incredible. But I think Sol has this mantra, this maxim that he would repeat. And he says, you train an animal, you teach a person. And so when Bob uses the word training, I automatically substitute that for the word teaching. That's why I think about why Jim Sinegal, who was obviously the mentee of Sol Price, he's like, if you're not spending 90% of your time teaching, you're not doing your job. You're teaching or training all of the people in your organization the standards and expectations of this common goal that your entire business is oriented around. And so the way Bob would describe this is he wants leaders. He doesn't want managers. And if you're a leader, it's much more like a coach than it is. And he gives us sports analogy, right? And so he talks about the difference between a coach in basketball and a manager. Remember, he wants leaders, not managers, and a manager in baseball. Have you ever considered, and this will basically illustrate his entire idea around this chapter. Have you ever considered the top supervisor on a baseball team is called a manager, while the top supervisor on a basketball team is called a coach? Look at the control each one has. His whole point is like, you got to get over this fear of relinquishing control. The baseball manager is controlling each move of the player, waving the shortstop over a little, or signaling when the runner should steal the base, or ordering the pitcher to walk a runner. In the baseball game, the manager is in complete control and fits the old style idea of a manager. What he means by old style idea of a manager is what they teach in business school, which he feels is useless. In the basketball game, the coach is relying on each player to make quick decisions about passes and shots. This is much more Bob's philosophy, okay? The coach may send in a play after a timeout, but control swiftly passes back to the players on the court. In business, the manager controls what each person does, assigning tasks and communicating the results upward. Bob does not like that. The leader, however, tells the team members what the group has to accomplish and challenges them to find the best way to do so. So now that we know that he wants leaders and not managers, let's get to his definition of a leader. A leader is somewhat like that of the master learner among apprentice learners of all different levels, with the intention of developing more master learners to allow the organization to grow. Goes back to that, his stated goal on the back cover. Our commitment to a common goal, which is growth through customer service. And then he tells a story to illustrate what this would look like inside of an organization. I worked one summer in quality control department of a metal products manufacturer. There were 2 people who managed the department. The first was a general manager who had a separate office. The other was an assistant who had a desk out with the rest of us. Whenever we had a question or a problem arose, nobody went to the general manager who's hiding in his cave, right? We all went to the assistant who was accessible. The assistant was growing in stature with the overall plant managers because the assistant knew so much more about everything else that was going on. So over time, the assistant leapfrogged the manager within the organization. The assistant was the true leader. Stay out there on the front lines where the action takes place. You learn more when you see everything up close. And then he repeats, do not deviate from the common goal. And the way he would say this is the team's pursuit of its common goal must be defended by outside attempts to weaken it. And then spread throughout the book are this simple, but I would say very valuable pieces of advice. Here's one of them. Pay attention to the silent people when you are leading. If half of the people are not asked for their new ideas, you only have a 50% chance of finding the best solution. Pay attention to the silent people when you are leading. This reminded me of Brad Jacobs. One of the most popular episodes I've done recently was episode 335. It's How to Make a Few $1 Billion by Brad Jacobs. Excellent book, also written by a person that loves founders. Brad sent me a great message that he said he was addicted to these founder book reviews. But in that book that he wrote, I thought it was actually genius. So, he buys a bunch of new companies all the time. And he was shocked that how many people never solicit advice from the people working in the company. This is very similar to what Bob's telling us here. And so he's got 2 questions they would ask every single employee. And I think there's genius in the simplicity of this idea. Number 1, what's the single best idea to improve our company? Or what's your single best idea to improve our company, rather? And number 2, what is the stupidest thing that we're doing as a company? And he makes the point in the book, like you would be shocked at how much valuable information that you get just from asking those 2 simple questions. It sounds very similar to what Bob is saying here. If half the people are not asked for their ideas, you only have a 50% chance of finding the best solution. And then something Bob also talks about is just how much he learned just by the examples good and bad, from other people he worked with and worked for over the years. And this is really, like, we're more than halfway through the book, and it really clicked for me the first time I was going through, because obviously, before I sit down and talk to you, I not only read the book, but I reread it, the highlights and notes over and over again. I'll read what I wrote on the note in 1 second. He says, while I attended college, I worked for a manufacturing company that employed about 300 people. I spent a lot of hours in the office on Saturdays. Sometimes other people came in on Saturdays, but only one person was certain to show up, the president and founder of the firm. At the time, he was 72 years old. He had an obvious interest and pride in what was going on. He knew each employee and appreciated his or her contribution. I count him as one of the 3 people who has most influenced my understanding of leadership. And so I got to that part and I reread it. I was like, wait a minute. He knew each employee and appreciated his or her contribution. And this is when it started to click. If his goal, we're talking about Bob now, okay? This is my note to myself. If Bob's goal is growth through customer service, he has to fully develop every single employee that delivers that service. His constant repeating that Fastenal's advantage is people serves his main goal. All of his ideas work together. It's that virtuous cycle, that virtuous flywheel. There's another advantage of this extreme decentralized decision-making, and that's the flexibility to respond to changes in the future. The future is not just next week or next month, but years out. Fastenal has been growing at a rate where it doubles in size every 2.5 years. That means that in 5 years, we are 4 times the size. So our people have to think that in 5 years, we will haul 4 times as much product around the country. I love this sentence. Good ideas start by simple approaches to what lies ahead. A proactive leader understands that unless one attends to the future, you get locked into the past. The main reason Fastenal doesn't grow much through acquisition is that we would buy too much old baggage with acquired companies. We want our leaders to do what is best for what lies ahead rather than repeating what brought success in the past. Anytime you stop thinking about the future, some people with better ideas will come along to eat your lunch. Anytime you stop thinking about the future, some people with better ideas will come along to eat your lunch. And if you have the flexibility and the empowerment of all and the decentralized decision-making and this complete autonomy that Fastenal does, sometimes you're the one that is inventing the future. So let me go back. I'm going to put the book down for 1 second. And I want to go back to that story of the CEO that was meeting with Buffett, the CEO that succeeded Kierlin. So this giant part of Fastenal's business now, this was invented after this book was written. Okay, the first version in 1997 was the fact that they have these vending machines. And the way I think about the vending machines is like, think of anytime you've been in like a hardware store, right? You go to Ace Hardware or Home Depot or anywhere else, and think about how all the equipment and supplies are presented. You're like kind of like searching through. It's kind of like a chaotic mess. So Will Overton, which was the former CEO, but he's no longer CEO now, but he's the one that was CEO after Bob. Okay, Overton also developed an industrial vending machine system. There's a video on YouTube that's fascinating about this. It's from Fastenal. Fastenal has their own YouTube channel. You can see the vending machine. If you just type in Fastenal vending machine, if you're interested in this, I thought it was actually cool. Overton developed an industrial vending machine, and I searched for it after I read this. I was like, I got to see what this looks like. Overton had developed an industrial vending machine system, helping Bob realize a lifelong goal. In 1951, as a 12-year-old working in his father's auto parts store, Bob was bothered by the fact that his dad had to send customers searching for nuts and bolts to someone else's store. He imagined that a vending machine installed at his father's place might pop out fasteners like gumballs. Once on his own, he tried to convert a cigarette vending machine to this purpose. He couldn't get it to work, so he started selling fasteners over the counter. Thus, Fastenal was born. 40 years later, working with a snack machine manufacturer and off-the-shelf software, Will Overton got the job done. Fastenal's vending machines have been a big hit with customers, so their vending machines are actually installed in their customers' locations. It cannot get simpler for this. You got to watch the video, I'm telling you. Overton got the job done. Fastenal's vending machines had been a hit with customers, generally helping them save 30% on supplies. The machines have cut down on theft and enabled automated reordering. That 4-year-old business, which I think now is like 15 years old, within 4 years old, this new idea already started contributing to 36% of the overall sales of Fastenal. Who knows? I think it's like over 40% now. Think about that. Go back. So now I'm picking back up the book. Think about the vending machine idea, which was not invented when Bob wrote these words. This makes these words hit so hard. We want our leaders to do what is best for what lies ahead, rather than repeating what brought success in the past. Anytime you stop thinking about the future, some people with better ideas will come along to eat your lunch. Thank God, due to their unique enabling of this and this super belief in the power of people, they were the ones that came up with the better idea. They were the ones that invented the future, thus avoiding somebody else coming along and eating their lunch. And so that relates to this idea of Bob's, that you have to overcome the common fear of delegating. And he has a really interesting way to illustrate this idea that was rather unexpected to me, and I don't think I've heard it described like this way anywhere else. The death of a family member or a close friend gives us a sense of great loss, a feeling that something will now be missing in our life. What we are missing is the uniqueness of the person who has died, a uniqueness that we were privileged to know and understand. That same uniqueness is present in everybody. We just don't come around to seeing it and to understanding it. Our first step to becoming a better leader is to start valuing everybody for the unique humanness. When I was a young man, I learned that everyone did better at tasks than I thought they would before starting them. I recognized this as a bias within me and adjusted my willingness to delegate accordingly. I delegated more than I used to, and I saw even better outcomes. My bias was a common fear of delegating. This came from not appreciating what talents lie hidden in other people. And he talks about people that started just picking out orders are now CEOs or very valuable executives. People who started picking orders or answering phones at Fastenal have grown to lead hundreds and thousands of new team members. And so some of this fear of delegating comes from, the giant egos that a lot of people in entrepreneurship have, and a lot of leaders and executives definitely have. And so he's got a piece of advice, and he's got 4 ways to do that. He's like, you have to learn to suppress your ego. Sam Walton said the exact same thing. He said, listen, you don't have to have a small ego to work at Walmart, but you have to be, very adept at hiding it, at essentially suppressing your ego is the way Sam Walton, that is the way Bob describes Sam Walton's idea. So Bob says, learn to suppress your ego. The first place to start if you want to suppress your ego is to admit that you have one. We all have one, and nobody likes theirs to be insulted. And in a work environment, egos, in a typical work environment, especially at a successful company, egos are in full bloom. So how do you work at suppressing your ego? I can give you 4 suggestions that I've observed over the years. Number 1, treat everyone as equals. Number 2, learn to stay silent sometimes. Number 3, be willing to get dirty. That goes back to the CEO, who's answering customer calls, and he's driving trucks. He's not like, I'm the CEO of this, public company. How can I be a truck driver? He's like, well, what's my goal? Our common goal, our commitment is to this common goal of growing through customer service, is not driving a truck because we're shorthanded in that department, and therefore our customer delivery comes later than it would if I get behind the wheel? Is that serving our customer? Is that me being committed to this common goal? No, it is not. So number 3, be willing to get dirty. Number 4, do good things anonymously. And then he feels the need to offer what he calls a few words of caution. There's some things that you're going to have to watch out for. It goes back to this. Number 1, keep the team goal consistent with that of the main organization. So, you're going to have subgroups. He calls them subgroups, teams. They will naturally develop their own goals. And in many cases, those goals will be in conflict with that of the main organization. One department can develop such great spirit and cohesiveness that it loses sight of its role in the larger organization. Keep that team goal consistent. Make sure all your team goals are consistent with that of the main organization. And another way to keep on the path, keep reminding yourself how little you know. Pardon me if I keep telling you how to forget how smart you are. Even if you are smart, you're better off forgetting about it. Start thinking instead about how little you know compared to the vast amount of knowledge in the world. Consider that everything that I have written here about leadership is something I learned from someone else. They either taught me or I learned from their example, good or bad. Nothing here stands out as a brilliant breakthrough. Everything is a passage of information through the lens of my observations. And I have no way of knowing how much is still out there to learn. And so he talked about early in the book, let me go back to that real quick, that even as an elderly gentleman, he's still constantly learning. At my senior citizen age, I am still improving, perhaps at a faster rate than I was several decades ago. With the experience of a lifetime, you're able to find the final pieces to complete the puzzle. And then if you think about what he's saying here, it's like, there's nothing here that stands out as a brilliant breakthrough. Everything that I wrote, everything that I've learned, I learned from other people, either through their example or otherwise. That's another form of suppressing his ego, of keeping your ego in check. And a good way to keep your ego in check is just to keep reminding yourself how little that you know. Thomas Edison has a great quote about this, and he says, we don't know 1/1000th% of anything. And I think it's important to point out the reason he keeps talking about pride and ego is because that gets in the way of your organization's commitment to the common goal. So he's going to summarize this because he loves maxims. And he makes this 10 basic rules about leadership. And he says the simplicity of each rule must overcome the thick walls of pride that prevent its implementation. One can only dream of a world where these rules are universally practiced. And we know because human nature doesn't change, they'll never be universally practiced. And so our ability to actually learn and change our behavior will always be at odds with the larger human nature. That's why I think it's so valuable. It's not because the ideas are so hard to understand. They're so hard to apply, and especially apply them over, since 1967, like Fastenal has. Number 1, challenge rather than control. Number 2, treat everyone as your equal. Number 3, stay out of the spotlight. Number 4, share the rewards. Number 5, listen rather than speak. Number 6, see the unique humanness in all persons. Number 7, develop empathy. Number 8, suppress your ego. Number 9, let people learn. Number 10, remember how little you know. Follow these rules and provide leadership to your world. And then what I love is he ties this all together to serve a mission that is bigger than any one person, any one company, any one industry, any one lifetime. He says the example that we set in the workplace will live on after us. Your life is an example for all to imitate. What parts of it others will imitate depends on the respect they have for you. If you have earned respect through your leadership, others will imitate your actions and you will influence people beyond your generation. The exceptional leadership of a Thomas Jefferson or an Abraham Lincoln or a Martin Luther King or a Helen Keller or Alexander the Great lives on for centuries and makes the world a better place for all of us. Become a leader at home and in your work. Make the world a better place because of what you do. And that is where I'll leave it for the full story. Highly recommend reading the book. If you want to buy the book using the link that's in the show notes on the podcast player or available at founderspodcast.com, you'll be supporting the podcast at the same time. That is 360 books down, 1,000 to go. And I'll talk to you again soon. One more quick thing before you go. There is a founders event taking place in person in Austin, Texas from September 27th through the 29th. For years, people have asked me to introduce them to other founders listeners. These events that I do, this is the third and final one this year, they exist for that reason, that sole reason only, to help you build relationships with other founders, investors, and high value people that listen to Founders Podcast. It turns out that's a good filter and an easy way to build a relationship with somebody. And these relationships produce non-linear returns. There's a few separate sources for this idea that I think you'll find interesting. I was at an in-person event in Texas, and I was actually having a very fascinating conversation with a guy where his job, there's a ton of wealthy family offices in Texas, and like a lot of them built fortunes in real estate and oil and gas. And his job was to do in-person events for other people that worked at other family offices. And the family office he was with, they put a ton of time and energy and money and resources behind this. And he had a great line to describe why. He said, because a relationship between these two types of people produce non-linear returns. This is also true for people that listen to founders. It is also something that reoccurs in the biographies that you and I study every week, this idea that relationships run the world. In fact, when I was able to speak to both Sam Zell and Charlie Munger before they passed away, they both said similar things. They had the same idea, they said it in different ways. But the idea was that you need to invest heavily in relationships. And they both told me examples of relationships they had built and maintained over decades. And so that is why the Founders events exist, to help you build relationships with other founders, investors, and high value people. That is also why I ran out the entire venue. So every single person that you see there is for the same reason that you are and has the exact same interest that you do. These are also all-inclusive locations, which means all you have to do is get yourself there, and I take care of the rest. Your lodging, your food, access to all the events is all taken care of. If you want to attend, go to founderspodcast.com/events. That is founderspodcast.com/events and apply, and I hope to see you in Austin.